Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York-based jazz saxophonist Peter Sparacino. He grew up outside of San Francisco and went to Indiana University, and now he calls New York City home. He talked about his latest 2018 CD, HyperGiant Hi-Fi, the debut album of the New York City-based ensemble Orkestra Eustoria. So, through collaborations and chance encounters in the turbulent and edifying current of the New York City music world, this Orkestra Eustoria was formed in the vibrant international musical community based in Astoria, Queens, New York. He is an innovative jazz musician with great stories, so please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Peter, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So I love HyperGiant Hi-Fi. It's a great album. Just want to tell you
Great.
up front. Let's talk about this with the Orkestra Eustoria. It's your brainchild. Talk to me about this project, this album, and how you really feel about it now that it's out in the world.
Well, it's kind of halfway out in the world right now. It's the actual release date, I think it is December 7th, so percolating outward. It's kind of how I feel after every project, I think, is at least, I mean, the album's been done for a while, and once it reaches completion, I hear a lot of things I like, but I'm like, oh, for the next time I would tweak this and do this here and move this around. But I'm really happy with how it came out. I mean, this one was kind of a more major undertaking than some other projects I've been a part of. I mean, it was just, everything is pretty heavily composed, and there was, with David Binney, who produced it, he went in and kind of like a little bit of collaboration on that, but mostly him, like 95% him for the post-production, like the synths and some of the layers in there, and then for the interludes, I did these kind of overdub saxophone chorales. So a lot of like work and planning and kind of trying to make it a complete album of itself. That's kind of everything that went into it, and I'm really, kind of happy with like this particular documentation of this particular point in time. I'm happy like how it came out.
Right on. So let's get to the beginning of your life here. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in a little bit south of San Francisco. A little bit south of San Francisco, in a town called San Mateo, California.
Oh, cool.
So that was a great place to grow up. And then I went to Indiana University, Bloomington, which I actually, when I was just kind of scrolling through some of your interviews, I saw you interviewed Michael Eaton.
Yeah.
Who was from Kansas City. He was my roommate for a while, but we both went to Indiana. That was the kind of journey in bullet points.
I like it. Talk to me about what jazz albums you were listening to early on in your life that kind of led you to the saxophone and into the world of jazz.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like with some of my music endeavors, it's might not kind of the catalyst for, beginning an instrument. For example, like my first instrument was clarinet, which I played that I started when I was 8 or 9. I mean, I didn't pick up a saxophone until I was 15 or 16, but the only reason I picked clarinet is I wanted to play an instrument. I didn't know, at that point, I was 8, I didn't know what any instruments were. I asked someone which instrument had the biggest range. They said clarinet. I was like, great, I'll play that, because I want to be able to play the most notes. So for saxophone, so I was pretty good at clarinet, which led to, when I went to high school, they were, the band director was like, well, we need someone in jazz band. Would you be interested in playing saxophone? It was more being in that environment. I just picked up a saxophone and started playing it. I hadn't honestly really heard much jazz up until that point. Kind of the saxophone came first. Once I started listening to it, I mean, because I started on tenor. Most people start on alto when they're really young, just for size and all that. But I mean, I was much older, I guess, than a lot of people start saxophone. I was 15 or 16, I think. So I started on tenor, and the first albums I listened to were, it's almost like I was trying to make up lost time. Like, how do I figure out how to play this thing? So like the first dose was, just like the classic tenor albums. I would just listen to those nonstop, like Dexter Gordon, John Coltrane, all the Sonny Rollins stuff. That was really the kind of the diet for a long time, if you will. I mean, I think when I was in high school, I transcribed the whole Dexter Gordon Go album. I was just like, I need to know this stuff. So yeah, until I was 18, that was it. That was pretty much all I listened to.
Say, when you went to Indiana, you studied with David Baker. That had to be a huge learning experience for you.
Yeah. I mean, he is, or was. Sorry. He was forced to be reckoned with on every facet, pretty much, of the on the performance spectrum, on the educating spectrum. I mean, he'd been everywhere, he'd done everything. So, kind of as you're going through the system, because he'd been there for so long, you almost didn't even get on his radar until you'd been there a couple of years. So it's not, even when you're talking to him in the first couple of years, he's just like he'd always know who you were, but just didn't really. He really didn't kind of register with him for a year or two, just because seeing 40 years of students come through. But even when that, before I kind of had a better, a good relationship with him, just the things that he says and the stories that he had, even if it wasn't directly, even if he's not telling you something like play this over this chord, which he would also do, that kind of knowledge thing, just the breadth and depth of experience that he had as a trombonist for a long time. I mean, he was a trombone player, top tier, just incredible trombonist for years and years until, he had a car accident and a jaw injury, and then he couldn't play trombone anymore, which eventually led to his university career. So just over the 4 years, it's like you just pick up from him so many things indirectly, and then directly too, because he was one of the pioneers of jazz education. So he's just, he really had the methodology down to a pretty exact science. He was one of the first to do it, so he had to make it very clear and very direct. So, when it wasn't an accepted part of the curriculum, that it was, something that was able to be digested and accepted into the curriculum at that time. So it was a great experience. I mean, definitely the years at IU were, I'm sure for a lot of people in this day and age, with the kind of quality music programs now, they're extremely formative, and people I know that I met there student-wise are still, I still see them around today all the time. Like, a lot of them live here. I'm in New York City. A lot of them live here. And it was a great time, and everyone, the original question was David, and, everyone just picked up an incredible wealth of information from him.
So after Indiana, you go back to the San Francisco area, and for a couple years you're playing in big bands in the clubs, getting involved, and then you go to New York. What was that few years after college like that kind of led you and I guess maybe got you prepared, so to speak, for New York? What was that like? Actually,
I spent a couple of months on a cruise ship first, which, wouldn't recommend everyone. So, and then I moved to San Francisco, and yeah, San Francisco, for me, it was a great training ground, if you will. Saying that, not to diminish the quality of players there, because they're all fantastic. I won't say, one's better than the other, but, just for me, like, kind of, but being in Bloomington was, as great as it was, it's definitely very small, right? I mean, it's a small city in Indiana. Just playing in a bigger city, and especially with the kind of, each city has its own culture, jazz culture, which I was definitely very much in the mainstream jazz thing at that point. So playing in that San Francisco thing, I mean, it's just, I learned so many tunes, played with, so many big bands that just big bands are I think a very vibrant part of the thing there. So it was almost like there was the quality, but it was also just the quantity. Like just the situations I was in, it was just, this tune, and then, off the bat, it was like, no. So then I had to go learn all those, and it definitely built up, like I was saying, on the quantity side, like a repertoire of things that, it kind of got me to a place where I felt a little more independent and set as a saxophone player and musician. And then also, I kind of happened to luck into some pretty good work situations, so I was able to, make a living playing the saxophone pretty quickly there, which just, let me spend a little more time on, development and practicing and all that stuff. So yeah, it was, time in San Francisco was great before I made the move to New York.
So when you get to New York, it's obviously the place, the mecca, the epicenter of jazz. Were you nervous? Did it feel natural? Were you ready for it? I mean, I don't know if you can ever say you're ready for anything that big, but what was it like when you got there and kind of started in the scene?
Well, interesting question. Yes, all those things. It felt kind of just like putting my arm over my eyes and jumping off a cliff. I was like, here we go. So actually, you know, when you say the mecca of jazz, I think it is obviously still an epicenter, but LA seems more and more these days. Like it's definitely that is. I think it seems like a kind of bi-coastal kind of balancing act at this point. Anyway, yeah. So when I first got here, yeah, I mean, I basically had nothing lined up. The only people I knew were IU people from Indiana, plus a couple other people that I known. It really just happened. Someone I've been talking to out here, you know, they said, "Well, we have a room for you. Do you want to come out?" I was like, I just got on the plane and went. So yeah, when I first got here, you know, it was intimidating, to be sure. I mean, I remember one of the first jam sessions I went to, a little more nervous than I was normally, just because the baseline level is extremely high. You know, the competence, and especially the quantities. There's just so many really good musicians. So it's, you know, I feel, I can't say this for everyone, but just definitely for me, you know, in the same way when I was in San Francisco, it took me a while to kind of get up to a place where I felt, okay, you know, at least I don't feel like I'm just flailing around here the same way in New York. You know, probably some of that was more me and mental myself and just feeling comfortable for a while in the scene, but that's what it was. So when I first got here, you know, given that I didn't really know too many people, I just went out to, almost for 2 years, I think, I just went out to sessions every night. I kind of had my calendar of, you know, on Tuesday I go here, Wednesday I go here. Once you do that, you know, you meet a lot of people, and some of the people I met during that are, you know, associations that continue. I mean, I've been here for, actually 10 years today. That's when I moved here. You know, I met hundreds of people when I did that, and out of that I met a couple of people and we really clicked, and it kind of led to some regular work things, plus some, you know, collaborations for albums and bands and things like that. Yeah, that was kind of the process. You know, it's gradual, and I mean, I think for everyone, unless, you know, there's like some guys who just move here and they have it together and boom, bang, they get it. And they're really just like exceptional players, and you know, that's great for the 99.5%. The other, it almost seems like everyone, it takes at least a year or two to kind of find your bearings, get situated, get set. Not in the life way too, but just in a playing way, kind of to really develop your playing and your musical whatever to a point where you feel comfortable in this scene, because it is huge and it's massive. And you know, there's new people moving here every day. There's scenes that I've never met them, they've never met me, but everyone's doing fine. You know, so it's really it's a great place to live and develop, because there's just always so much that you will never get to, which means there's always so much more to learn. So it's a really you know, it's been a good thing.
So the one part of your educational process, your growth, your learning as a musician is, you know, you got the classroom, you got your gigs that you do on stage, but it's also seeing live jazz. What live jazz shows have you witnessed that really moved you, that you remember?
Well, actually, I was trying to think the first one. Actually, the first jazz show I saw wasn't very good at all, and I was like, ugh, is this all there is? But the second one was amazing, which kind of put it all back together. But I remember one of the earliest ones I saw was I saw Chris Potter doing trio, and this was a while ago, so he's still doing. I mean, I remember specifically he did Okinawa, which is one of his early tunes. Well, not early, but tune from a while ago. I'm not sure he does it anymore. So I remember that was incredible, just because at that point, you know, I hadn't seen a whole bunch of well, I'd seen a bunch, but, you know, just seeing someone at his level just own absolutely everything that he's doing and just, you know, it was great. And so that one's definitely imprinted. And then when I moved to the city, yeah, maybe not so much in jazz, but I remember the first time, I bring this up because actually the bass and drummer, well, not why I bring it up, but the bass and drummer for this band, they are on my album, the one that we're talking about. It's a band called New York Gypsy All-Stars, and I saw them at the Winter Jazz Fest they have here every year in the city, at the now defunct venue, Sullivan Hall. I remember the first time I saw that, I just, like, my head exploded. I could not believe what they were doing. It was just, like, the most exciting, most, kind of engaging music I'd heard in a long, long time. So, yeah, those are kind of maybe the two not the brightest, but two bright points that, I can think about.
Sure.
Off the top of my head.
So why do you love jazz?
Well, I like listening to it, I like playing it. But I guess it's a complicated question, I think. I mean, at its baseline, like, I love all the music that, you know, kind of the original jazz innovators developed and came up with. It's, you know, it's just, I'll put on a Sonny Rollins album any day, and it's just, oh my God, it's just, you know, the kind of immediacy and innovation in the moment is great. These days, I think the word jazz like that, just maybe from some of the academic, there's definitely some more structure to it, I think, than in the past. But when you say, why do I love jazz, there's that, I think Wayne Shorter quote, something, and he says, jazz means to me that I dare you. And I think really, that's kind of at its core what draws people to it, and why people want to play it, and why it's, you know, when you're kind of on the ground floor of those innovators, whether they're talking about Charlie Parker or, you know, later down the road, it's like when people are kind of pushing new ground in the moment, something that's never quite happened that way before. I mean, it's just, that's kind of when the sparks fly. So, that for me, that's, well, whether it's jazz, which again is more, I think, a defined genre maybe these days than it has been in the past, or any other type of music, and that's what I was trying to do on this album. It's just when that immediacy of like, yeah, I dare you to try this or that. I think that's something really special, and especially, you know, when you look at guys like Herbie. You know, I was reading his autobiography. What was that called? Promises, maybe? The one he came out with a couple of years ago. Yeah. You know, he's like that. Oh, Possibilities. Sorry. Possibilities.
Okay, yeah. There you go.
You know, he's never doing anything the same way, ever. You know, it's just incredible. Like, as soon as he reaches some sort of comfortable place, he feels, well, yeah, he almost feels like it's imperative that he moves onward. So tunes that he's been playing for a long time, you know, now he'll be playing them in a different way or a different time signature. You know, his albums he's always evolving on every single one. You know, in the 70s, he was talking about one thing, like, he was just desperate to get some new sounds, and with the synthesizers kind of coming to development in that day and age, I mean, he went to the length of having, you know, giant, like, 4x8 or whatever it was, these, like, massive machines that the synthesizers were at that point. He brought them on tour and then also had a dedicated synthesizer guy for the concerts. I mean, that's, like, incredible dedication to keeping it fresh. And so it's kind of that spirit and that ethos and just I mean, that's personally why jazz initially attracted me, and those elements that still do.
So let's get to the essence of you. Everyone has a version or a perception of who you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but you know yourself best. Who do you think you are?
Oh. I feel like this is a question I should be asking in like 50 years.
That's right. We'll have to do it.
Who am I? I mean, I think that's what, you know, that's the whole reason anyone does anything, irrational as playing a saxophone and writing music and doing the rest of it. That's the whole kind of mission of this, is to kind of find what is you that makes you tick. And if you really tap into that, that's what, not that you're just doing this solely for other people, but that's what attracts other people and makes them want to hear what you do. So on a musical level anyway, but ties into your just who you are as a person also, I think. So who am I? Well, I would encourage all your listeners to buy the album. You can find out that side of it. Yeah, I'm always just trying to force myself not to fall into like a comfortable routine pattern, because I think that is super easy to do in music, especially, in all areas, but especially in music. Like, you can kind of fall into a comfortable zone without realizing it and just stay there. So every now and then, when I feel, I can kind of feel it gets a little like stuffy and musty and you're playing, you're like, oh, can't happen. So that's when I always go and kind of try and either search someone out to take a lesson with, who can kind of say, what are you doing? Like, you need to try some new things or something like that. So to answer your question, I guess I'm just, who am I? I guess I'm trying to find out the answer to that question as well. That's the best answer I can give to a pretty difficult question, I would say.
The thing that I like about this question is it's kind of the David Lynch question, because at the end of the day, you peel back all of these layers, because usually this is the hardest question, and there's a myriad of different ways. And the beauty of this is the first comment that you made is probably the most poignant about who you are. Realistically, we're all trying to get there. Asking you in 50 years is the answer. That's the shortest Twitter response possible, because that's kind of the essence. And that's the beauty of this. It's kind of like jazz. It's instantly throwing you into improv, I mean, it's kind of, but it gets the essence of you. So at any rate, thank you. That was the most difficult question. It was the final one. The test is over. You passed. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, man. I really do. And I appreciate the music. It's great.
Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in San Francisco, Indiana, New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Peter for his time, his music, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. For everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.